Texas is the only team in college football this year that has no weakness. This is a perfect team. They have no holes. They have no flaws at all. From top to bottom, Texas is stout everywhere at every position. You got the golden boy taking over at quarterback and Arch Manning. And in spite of him not really receiving a bunch of action last year, when he was on the field, he was really impressive. He was second in college football in yards per pass. This guy is a really good deep ball thrower with really good accuracy, and he's a surprisingly good athlete. Despite his last name, which, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning weren't really the most mobile guys in the world, Arch Manning is a completely different quarterback from what those guys are. He has a little bit of Josh Allen in his game, and he came in as a wildcat quarterback in a lot of situations for Texas last year. I was like, you got Arch Manning, the nephew of Eli and Peyton, and on design quarterback runs. Arch Manning, I don't question if he's going to be the real deal. What I question is, what's the ceiling for Arch Manning? Just how good is this young cat going to be? Is he going to live up to the glaze that Paul Feinbaum was giving him a few days ago when he said that Arch Manning is going to be the greatest college football quarterback since Tim Tebow broke onto the scene in 2006? Time will tell, but all of the talent and the physical ability is there for Arch Manning to be an all-time great at Texas. And some may argue that if he would have started in favor of Quinn Ewers during Texas' playoff run, maybe they would have won the national championship. But not only does Texas have Arch Manning, but the wide receivers that he's throwing to, look, they are 5'6" deep at this position. They're like a football factory. You lose Isaiah Bond, you lose Matthew Golden to the NFL, and you just reload. You're like a football factory. You're just a conveyor belt when it comes to talent. You lose talented guys to the NFL, and you replace them with just as talented guys like Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, who led the team in touchdowns last year. Ryan Wingo was one of the best true freshman wideouts in the nation last year. Then you got two other really good freshman wide receivers that are coming into the program that should be really productive right out the gate, such as Khalid Lockett, who was the second highest rated receiver coming out of the 2025 recruiting cycle. Michael Terry, he's a hybrid player. He can play both running back and receiver, but he's expected to be used majorly in the receiver role, and he was a top 100 recruit. And the reason why Michael Terry is mainly going to be playing wide receiver, despite his ability to be a really good running back, is that Texas somehow happens to have the deepest running back room in the country. Remember, before the start of last season, Texas lost two running backs in fall camp to season-ending injury. C.J. Baxter, Christian Clark, all went down back-to-back before the season even started. And the question was, how good was Texas' running game going to be? Well, it didn't really matter because the other dude who came in replace of those guys led the team in rushing yards, yards per carry, and he was third in receiving yards, and Quintravion Wisener. So Quintravion Wisener comes in the last season, probably like the third or fourth string back. He has a few injuries ahead of him, and all of a sudden he burst onto the scene, and he's one of the best running backs in this conference. That just shows you not only how talented Texas is, but how deep they are. Because they lost two running backs to season-ending injuries in fall camp, and yet the run game, the ability to run the football, was not an issue for this squad. Now, the biggest concern with this offense is going to be the offensive line, because they lose 4 starters to the NFL. It doesn't matter, because they got Kyle Flood as their offensive line coach, who is the best offensive line coach in America. Not only is he really good at recruiting the offensive line, but he's incredible at developing this position. So I'm not worried about Texas offensive line, especially with how much they commit to making sure that they get some of the best offensive linemen available, whether it be in the portal or through the high school ranks. The offensive line should be, once again, a strength for Texas. And just like how their offensive line is good, their defensive line is just as good. Steve Sarkisian, He started building Texas through the trenches because you're only as good as what you are on the line of scrimmage, as good as what the wide receiver play and the corner play is starting to get. Football is still a game that is won and lost in the trenches, and Steve Sarkisian understands that. That's why Texas is probably the only team in the nation that is too deep on the defensive line. A lot of teams' issues is that they don't have enough depth on their defensive line. Texas never has that issue because they put a lot of resources into this. Not only do they have really good starters, but they also have really good backups, and they do a really good job of rotating these guys to make sure that they stay fresh. That's why their pass rush was as good as what it was last year, and why their pass rush is going to continue to be a strength. They have a really good linebacker in Anthony Hill, who was a first-team All-American last year. And then in the secondary, you've been really good in that position area as well these last couple of years. Jahdae Barron had a great season last year. He was a first-round draft pick. Free safety, Michael Taffy, he possibly could be a high draft pick in 2026. He was a second-team All-American selection. So you got a defense that has about 2 or 3 All-American caliber players on it. Texas, whether you hate them or you love them, you got to admit that this team, without a doubt, doesn't really have any flaws at all. The only flaws may be that you question if Steve Sarkisian can win the big game. Texas is my pick to win a national championship this year because they have a bunch of high-end talent, and they also have a bunch of good depth, which is important because nobody goes throughout a season without a few guys getting banged up along the way. Can you be able to have guys that can fill in and give you serviceable play in replace of losing some of your starters for a significant amount of time? Texas has the ability to do that, and that's why they are not just my pick to win it all, but they are pretty much the media's pick to win a national championship as well, because there is no other team entering this season that has a roster as flawlessly constructed as what the Longhorns have entering this upcoming season.